So I might take questions from the floor now. Any questions? Oh, sorry, Martin, can I also say, just for protocol, if you could please say your name, where you're from, and if you have declare any interest that you might have in the base.
Martin Locke, Leading Partners, no particular interest. Just on the funding side, Julian, so you had your slide there on value chain, and then on the top line you had funding. I just wondered if you might be able to, clarify where you've actually got to in terms of coming up with the funding puzzle for the project, because there's obviously a timeline in terms of spending the money on the major infrastructure or the enabling infrastructure to when you had a process for sale or lease much later on in that process. It's a
good question, Martin. The trick is we're still at the ideation phase. If you apply design thinking here, we're actually looking at it and saying threshold issues of transport and mobility. Transport and mobility solutions will determine ultimate land use and intensity. And until we've cracked that nut, we don't actually know what the land can actually yield, when it can yield it, and therefore what are the financials associated with it. All I can say is that we need to find a pathway to make this project a reality, because we're acutely aware of if it's not viable, then it won't get done. But at this stage, what we need to do is collect the ideas, understand what type of transport solution can be mobilised to then support the land use and intensity, and through that iterative process, we'll come to an understanding regarding the actual viability of it, and then we'll look at the funding sources that we can apply to, I guess, bring this into reality on a staged basis. I hope that answers your question. Next question, anyone? Got to be some questions. Over here.
Thomas Hale from Zarns, no particular interest. Absolutely, sorry. Interested in the medium to long-term plans and how you're going to build in the flexibility to make sure you're not limiting the possibilities.
David, would you like to?
The problems with projects that take 20 to 30 years is that they take 20 to 30 years. And so why we've divided these 7 destinations into 3 timeframes is to enable us to focus effectively on it. For example, if we call for great ideas for Glebe Island, the notional activity period from Glebe Island is 2022 and beyond. So the reality of it is 10 years out, people's great ideas now are not going to be they won't regard it as a process of worth. So we're going to concentrate on those first 4. But along the way, we've got other agreed activities. For example, we're working with the Port Authority of New South Wales on just what their future thinking is so that we can start factoring that into what we do in terms of transport and otherwise. But in terms of residential or other development in the longer term ones, we're not going to go there yet, but we are going to enable through the transport solution for it to be considered later.
More questions? Yes, up the back.
At what stage would it be appropriate to keep the public informed of cost-benefit analyses on quite small detail, like temporary accommodation and similar intricacies of the assessment that you would have to make on such a large-scale project, but to sort of stay with the community in an open and creditable process? It strikes me that it would be a good idea to have a public issue of what that information as it progresses, a full cost-benefit analysis of the options. The question is that at what stage would you release cost-benefit analysis on the decision-making that you're making? Like yourself.
Okay, well the answer to that is once we've determined what it is we're going to do and what elements we're going to do and where we do them, there will be a public process that enables us to be open and transparent about it. But we can't do that at the moment because we haven't decided what's actually going to be done. But our funding model will demand, the Treasury, for example, will demand that cost-benefit analysis and benefit-cost ratio processes are applied right across the board. And we can be open and public about that. There's no problem yet, but we just don't know what it is we're going to do yet, and that's what this is about. Now, in terms of the lack of reaching out to the public, that's what this summit has been all about. The public discussion paper is out for consultation. We've launched the call for great ideas. We've had 1,500 people from members of the public through this activity across the weekend, and we've got lots of ideas and understandings from them. So the process that we've started in this summit will continue right throughout the rest of this year and into next. And in terms of the actual numbers that you've asked for, we will expose those when we know what they are, and the government will demand that we do so.
If I could add to that as well, David, you've seen the 5 objectives that we're assessing this success against. We're also working closely with a number of stakeholders to define what the objectives are. And the objectives are multidimensional. The objectives will not be about maximising pure financial return on government land, because you've seen the objectives of what we're trying to generate here. And it's about the appropriate balancing of those objectives to achieve the best outcome for all Sydneysiders. Another question?
Hi, I'm Wendy Hayhurst, CEO at the New South Wales Federation of Housing Associations. Thanks for a very interesting presentation. I'm just noted that you're actually working very closely with Transport New South Wales and also on the port strategy. There is an evolving affordable housing strategy that I think is being put into place now with a new minister, well, 2 new ministers in planning and housing. Is that the sort of work you will be doing there to ensure that affordable housing does actually get realised in the Bays precinct?
I'll start on this, if I may, Julian. The answer is yes. That work, that diversity in housing model, that's us. The urban growth is leading the work in relation to this, and I'll get Simon to explain.
Okay, so what we've tried to do is look at our housing in a much broader spectrum than just talking about social and affordable. So from a business point of view, we've focused on housing diversity. So one component part of that is affordable housing, and then there are another groupings of areas that we're focused on from the point of view of housing solutions moving forward. So that strategy for us will be presented to the Minister. It's already had a preliminary presentation in the middle of the year, and that will form our business strategy moving forward. And the key to that is we're going to run 3 pilots. So get underway with 3 pilot projects initially and be able to test that. So that will all be as a forerunner to any solutions that we roll out in the Bays precinct. So we'll be able to take advantage of that experience and that testing.
Other questions? Maybe one more question.
I'm interested just Jeff Turnbull from Inner Sydney Regional Council for Social Development. I'm interested to know how what's happening in the Bays then ties in with other areas that urban growth is looking at, so that you actually get some complementarity rather than competition between those different developments, whether that's in terms of what's happening in Green Square in terms of housing delivery, central to Everleigh, Bays, along the West Connect.
To the transformation life cycle. Jeff, the answer is that the way we're going to approach this, as we are at the Bays, which I described a little bit before, is the same way for each of the projects. We have 7 portfolio projects currently in the urban transformation program, and this is one of them. Another really important one is Central to Everleigh, and I'll ask Simon to expand on Central to Everleigh just very briefly. But the same process that we're trying to get the life cycle back up so I can show you just to refresh. But we're going to do this by starting with the thinking, looking at the funding, then go to design and build, and then look at the living city outcomes in each of our projects. So if you look at an aerial shot, the base precinct perimeters, 80 hectares and 94 hectares of water, is only about 3 kilometres from central to Everley, 90 hectares of government-owned rail corridor land, and a whole range of other surrounding, other surrounding land holdings and private ownership. And that's, I guess, something we should make a point about. It's not only what we do within the government boundary that's going to be important, but what we do will enable development and other activities in private land holdings that are adjacent. So what we're going to do is to look at this model and apply it to each of the projects, no matter what size they are. And I'll just give Simon to give you a sketch of how that works at Central to Everley.
So as we've talked about before, Jeff, both the projects have a connection through the City of Sydney. Okay, so what we've agreed is that what we're doing at Central to Everley with regard to transport and transport studies will be taken into account with respect to the bay. So it's one holistic view, exactly what David just said. Exactly the same for health, for education, for all the other social services. We're looking at the projects holistically because their catchments overlap. Okay, so moving forward, the intent is to how do we actually then coordinate those and then communicate those in a coordinated approach. That's something that we're setting up over the next couple of months.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I might ask David to conclude.
I'll do that very briefly. Thank you again for coming along today. It's been most important for us to be able to intersect like this. I'm not going to say too much except for to give you a sketch of what we'd like to open up to you now. What you see here is based on our business methodology and operandus. It's about being open, transparent and welcoming, and so we'd like to invite you to move through the displays and to see just what it is we're proposing. I would like to leave one thought with you though, and that is if your only thought or retention out of what we've said here today is the call for great ideas, please let it be that, because it is a fundamentally important process. It will enable us to get the genuine ideas from you and the industry, and I really commend the process. So thank you for coming today, and please enjoy the interactive elements.